Evet, buluşmamızın bu bölümünde küresel hedefler çağında medya konusunu tartışacağız. Ama önce kısa bir videomuz var, hep birlikte izliyoruz.
At the United Nations headquarters in New York, 193 world leaders will put their signatures to the Global Goals for Sustainable Development. It's a document that commits them to delivering 17 goals by 2030 that aim to end extreme poverty, fight inequality, and tackle climate change in all countries around the world.
I'ma tell you, I'ma tell them, I'ma tell you, I'ma tell them, I'ma tell everybody, yeah. Coming out in hundreds and thousands, yo. Time don't reach to save our people, yo. Turn down for what everybody sing along, oh. Remember the people that put you in power and gave you the mantle.
I'm going in and out. Cause we the new generation, we gotta make a change from north, east, west, straight to the south. Yes. Okay, Guinea-Bissau. Your friend say we are all living in the house. Cotonou, Zimbabwe, Nesadini, Bubua, Yebeja, Wakwa, Ghana, Bissau. We gotta make changes. You ready? The Africa story we see on the telly. Are we proud? Do we steady? We are so rich, but we look petty. We be the new faces. And we gotta end poverty. We gotta fight inequality. We've been through stages. Africa, you may know what they are. Say, boy, and so say, your charity, you don't know.
Oh yeah, la légalité. Oh yeah, tous pour la liberté. Oh yeah, dans le respect. Oh yeah.
Toi et moi debout, tous au rendez-vous. Yeah. On est jeunes, on est forts. Est-ce que t'es d'accord? On va changer le monde.
Yeah, solo fue. Ya no utilices de noche, no solo como solo como un zombie. Ya no utilices de noche, mamá, solo como un
News of the United Nations Global Goals for Sustainable Development has caused quite a song and dance that has gone viral. It's called Tell Everybody, a hit single by African artists urging world leaders to stick to their promise to end poverty, to fight inequality, and to tackle climate change by 2030.
Evet, sıra geldi panelimiz ama öncesinde bir kez daha hatırlatmak istiyorum. Hashtag 2030 şimdi etiketiyle yaptığınız Instagram paylaşılarınızı dışarıdaki fuaye alanında basıp size bugün anısı olarak vermek istiyoruz. Aklınızda bulunsun diye söylüyorum. Evet, paneli başlatmak üzere moderatörümüz UNDP İstanbul Bölgesel Merkezi Yönetişim ve Barış'ın İnşası Bölgesel Ekip Lideri Shelley Inglis'i sahneye davet ediyorum. Shelley. Shelley için bu kadar mı alkış? This is all. Shelley, this is a young crowd. They love you. Thank you very much, Shelley. Ve panelistlerimiz Burçin İnanç. Burçin, biraz önce oynuyordun, gördüm seni oturduğun yerden. Çok neşeli ve çok hızlı geldin. Hoş geldin. Burçin İnanç, alkış. Burçin İnanç, çok iyi tanıyoruz hepimiz. Gazeteci. Niye ben Burçin diyorum Barçın? Barçın, sen benim 20 yıllık arkadaşımsın. Ya sahnenin şeyine bırakır mısın beni? Sahnenin büyüsünden dolayı. Barçın İnanç, gazeteci Hürriyet Daily News ama Hürriyet Daily News'a gelene kadar nerelerde neler yaptı? Uzun yılları var. Pınar Dağ, veri gazeteciliği uzmanı. Pınar Dağ, sizi görmek çok güzel. Hoş geldiniz. Alkışlar Pınar Dağ için. Barçın İnanç, Shelley Inglis ve Selin Girit, BBC'den geliyor gururumuz Selin Girit. Alkışlar bu kadar değil Selin, bu kadar değil. Hoş geldin, iyi ki geldin. So, Shelley, floor is all yours. You have all your panelists and here is the stage.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and we're going to switch into an English panel on the role of the media in the age of these global goals. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you. And I just want to tell you a little bit about myself and then the panelists before we begin our discussion. So, as was mentioned, my name is Shelley Inglis. I come from the United States, and I moved here to Turkey in January. When I was in UNDP in New York last year, in 2014, I spent a lot of my time working on these global goals. A lot of our work went to supporting member states in discussing what are the key development challenges that we face and engaging the public and the worldwide community in a dialogue on what are the important issues that people themselves want to see tackled in the next 15 years. And one of those issues is what I focus on, which is effective democratic governance and a world of inclusive societies and peaceful societies. And that goal, Goal 16, is now a part of this new agenda. Our topic today we'll talk about in the context of that goal, and more broadly about the role of media in contributing to social good in today's society. I have a great panel with me, and I'm really proud to have an all-female panel in the world of gender equality, and Goal 5 is on women's empowerment and gender equality. Their bios are available to you, but let me briefly introduce them. So, Barçın İnanç is a journalist, and she's working for Milliyet Daily Ankara Bureau as a diplomatic reporter. She is now a TV reporter for CNN Turk, and she has a degree, a bachelor's degree in international relations from the Middle East Technical University. So she's a long-standing journalist in Turkish media. Welcome, Barçın. Thank you for joining us.
Just a small correction.
Please.
I'm currently the opinion editor of Hürriyet Daily News.
Oh, okay.
I used to be working on TV, but now I'm back on the printed media.
Great. So we will hear about that, I'm sure. Pinar Dag, next to Barçın, is a journalist and founder of Dag Media. Pinar works quite extensively on open data issues and open data in journalism. She's working now on a School of Data Turkey, which is a project that she's been pursuing for quite a long time. And she's been with UNDP working on training journalists on the use of data in their journalism. Thank you for joining us, Pinar. And finally, Selin Girit is a journalist for the BBC for over a decade. She is the producer of World Agenda, which is BBC Turkish flagship TV program for 4 years. She holds a master's degree in international relations and politics on the EU, and she is also very involved in drama. She's just moved back to Istanbul from living in London for 10 years. Thanks for joining us, Selin. So we're going to have an interactive discussion today, and we're going to start by having our panelists talk about what the role of media is today in contributing to social goods and to overall progress in our societies. Barçın, can I ask you to begin? What's the role of media in today's society?
Well, we have, I would say we have multiple...
Turn on your...
Sorry about that. Let me start again. We have many accidents about me today, huh? I think we have multiple roles as far as the media is concerned. On the one hand, I think one way of contributing to social good is to question how our resources are being utilized to serve the social good. Governance, good governance is very important, especially in terms of reaching the goals, decreasing poverty, etc., etc. We have to make efficient use of our resources, for instance. So one of our mission is to question how our limited resources are used to reach these goals, for instance. So the critical thinking, the questioning, how can we, do better? That's part of it. Another part of it is also, an issue that has been underlined perhaps by the Twitter representative, is perhaps to be the voice of the underprivileged, of those who have not perhaps equal access to the agenda. That could be in the women, the underprivileged, those with have lower income push of the societies. So by bringing up their issues, we can raise awareness about that. So let me just start by these two, and we'll continue perhaps.
Excellent, thanks. And Pinar, I mean, this issue of being able to use and demand that governments and societies use their resources effectively, that's very linked to the open data movement. Can you talk a little bit about your work?
Yes, sure, and thank you. I've been working with open data almost 3 years now, but open data is a very controversial topic actually for the governments and for the journalists as well. So having governments' public data as open is helping journalists to make really good stories actually. So in digital age, we need more open data, like free data, structured data to make good stories. So this is really one of the key points for journalists. And for the future of the media, data-driven projects and data-driven sources is really helping your stories more transparent and more public interest, and is really raising the value to public. Thank you.
Thanks. And Selin, do you want to speak a little bit about the role of media in today's society?
Sure, why not? That's why we are here, aren't we? The role of media, that's a very critical question, especially for those of us living in Turkey, I suppose, because media is a big question mark. What is the role of media, and how better the media can serve the public good? Previously, and probably sometimes in countries similar to Turkey, the role of the media is perceived as just conveying what the government or the elite are saying to the people, with the assumption that the people could not possibly, perhaps, understand those messages without the aid of an intermediary, for instance. So, from time to time, we see that in the media, the journalist being as the middlemen, for instance. But in time, that has, of course, changed. The journalist today has to bring the governments into account, has to serve the public good, has to stand beside, as Barchin has very rightly pointed out, the underprivileged. How does he or she do that? How does he or she serve the social good in a better context? Is, as I said previously, a big question mark, especially in countries similar to Turkey, unfortunately.
Thanks so much. I mean, maybe we can look at that more deeply. How has the media in Turkey and in other places, what are the kinds of issues that the media is grappling with that represents better underserved, vulnerable, more marginalized communities? Barchin, do you have some examples that we could discuss?
Since this is a panel made of all women participants, I think it could be relevant to talk about gender equality, because we're supposed to talk about, in terms of the goals, inclusive societies. And as it was underlined in the previous panel, you can't have an inclusive society when you ignore the other half. Now, in Turkey, we have a controversy as far as domestic violence and violence against women are concerned. We have a bleeding wound called women murders. A lot of women are being murdered by their relatives, most often by their husbands, ex-husbands, ex-boyfriends, current boyfriends, and there's a disagreement between the government and the women NGOs about the numbers. The women NGOs argue that the numbers have risen and that the government is not paying enough attention, that the government is not taking enough measures. Whereas the women NGOs whereas the government is saying, no, there isn't such a shocking increase. It has just become more visible. Now, I'm not going to enter into the debate about whether it has increased or not. But even if it has become visible, I think that's a good thing, because that raises awareness that there is such a problem. So it's independent of whether it has increased or stayed the same. The fact that we, the press, we have been talking more about these women murders, first raises awareness. Second, it put pressure on the government. There has been cases which the Turkish audience would remember, Güldünya Tören, Ayşe Paşalı. These were women murdered by their relatives. Each time it has, we, the press, and the women NGOs, of course, and it's an interactive thing, have raised such an outcry that after these murders, the government has at times taken steps to amend to the legal law, the laws, in order to discourage such murders. And we at Hürriyet, for instance, we have a project in order to raise awareness about domestic violence. If you allow me 2 more minutes, I can talk about that. Well, I'm not responsible of the project, but I came before I read it, and it seems that Hürriyet openly says that it doesn't says I have stolen it, but apparently they were inspired by a project in Sweden. So they did the same as the case was in Sweden. In a shopping mall, they put a camera, and in the elevator, they have these players, pretending that the man is sort of, showing aggression to women. Out of 60 cases, only 7 has reacted, whereas the majority, 53, looked up in the air, pretended to ignore it. Now, I think showing this video in our website is a very positive and interesting tool to raise awareness and to encourage people to say, domestic violence, violence against women is not something you should turn your back. It's not an inter-family issue. It's a public issue. You have to act when you see it. So in terms of raising awareness and pushing people to take action, I think it was a very positive project and a project that deserves to be underlined.
Thanks so much. And for those of you who don't know the goals well, of course, as I said, Goal 5 is the goal on women's empowerment and gender equality, and it has within it a target that all states of the world have agreed to combat violence against women. So it is one of the global goals and one of the efforts we have. Maybe, Pinar, I can turn to you in terms of the work you've been doing in uncovering data related to worker fatalities in Turkey.
Yes, sure. When some disasters happened, at that time when we decided to cover some stories, and we really had some problems. We couldn't find really good data, and also we were not sure which one is really accurate and is really updated data. After that, we decided to make database about fatalities and about minors accidents. So we, hopefully my friend is going to put on the screen now, and we made it one project. It calls Open Database Disease Workers Turkey. We are updating regularly. I hope it's yes. Yes. So we are, the project is, firstly, we start with NGOs data, government data, and the crowdsourcing data. Then after we realize collecting all this data makes really enough sense to make good stories because it was not really good enough. So then we start to make our own data sets, and we start to collecting by monitoring media stuff and media reports, and start to make this database. And this is every day is updating, and we are not only collecting workers who that were, we especially also focusing on companies and firms, because it's already public actually, so we are not targeting them. But now this database is showing us in 2 years maybe which company, how many workers is that, which company. So we will get more information, and it will be maybe more helpful for the government and for journalists to understand why this company is not good enough, about the workers issue, and why that much people are dying in 3 years in the same company. So this database, it's awarded Open Data this year, 2015, and we're collecting and still is collecting. So what is the social good about this project? Lots of people started helping us all around Europe, some of them Turkish, and they said, we can collect this data and helping you. So the spreadsheet of this database is open for everyone, and anyone can access simply and just help us to really put all this information, and then we analyze daily basis. So this database is open everybody and helping anyone to just follow the data regularly. So this is what we are doing. And this is not only one project. I've been talking about this project too many times. Maybe some of you already know that. But now we are working about education system, about data-driven, and about really secular education system, and try to understand what is the quality in 10 years and everything. So it's data-driven things, and open data makes journalists more, help you to make more good journalism, so plus journalism. So this is, I can say now.
Yeah,
I think Barchan has.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in out of jealousy. You see, conventional media sometimes can come under pressure from the governments, and which sort of pushes us sometimes to refrain from revealing certain numbers and news that could lead reactions of the government, So sometimes we are forced to be very careful. And that's when the alternative media comes in. And I think it's a good example of how, technology in media comes at the service of the social good. When the conventional media does not fulfill to the full what it should do, that's one thing I would like to underline. The second is, as I said, sometimes because we're so much under pressure, conventional media went to a lot of downsizing in Turkey, for instance. In the past, when 5 person used to do 5 jobs, now 1 person is doing the job of 5 person, which means that we lack the resources, the manpower, or let's say the women power, the personal power to investigate these numbers, to go by one, because we don't have the time. And therefore, again, that's another example on how an alternative outlet can come to the help of the social media good.
Yeah, I can add a few things after that. So it's really good point, because when you start to collect this data, and it's open data, so we are not selling, it's open, everybody can access and can use it for their stories. But good thing is lots of different media organizations ask these data sets to use it in their stories. So it's, imagine you're working on it, but it's also helping to others to measure what is that troll daily basis, and you can get more really influence, and this help maybe punish your government or help the transparency. So I agree what you really mentioned. Thank you.
Great. Selin, maybe you could talk a little bit about BBC's work in terms of contributing to public good and recent events and current events in Turkey and beyond.
Sure, and I could actually link to what Pınar and Barçın were saying, because we've been talking about numbers now. And, well, I'd like particularly to talk about the migrant crisis and how BBC dealt with it. And numbers are very important. Yes, we have to definitely know the number of people who have been displaced, the number of people who were drowned in the sea and lost their lives because they were trying to make their way to Europe, the number of people who have actually made their way, and the number of people, for Turkish people, the number of people who have stayed here in Turkey. For those who don't know, we have 2 million, almost 2 million refugees registered in Turkey at the moment. I'd like to give 2 particular examples about how BBC in general, how BBC reporting in general have contributed to social good, have made an impact to, have made and possibly and hopefully will make an impact to individuals' lives. One report was, actually both of these are from BBC's Panorama program, which is a very high-impact program on TV. This program will be broadcast on BBC World for those of you who might want to follow up the story in 2 weeks' time. I think, if I'm not mistaken, on the 17th of October or 16th of October, something like that. So this particular reporter was following the journey of the migrants who have made their way into Europe. And in Hungary, he met this woman, a 60-year-old woman. Her name was Fahriye, and she was fleeing from Kobani. She had made it to Hungary with her family, and she was talking about the suffering that they had been through, her grandkids getting ill on the way, etc. And more dramatically, she got ill, and she was taken to a tent hospital in the area. She refused to go because she was scared that she would lose the other members of the family. And in the end, she did lose touch with her family, and she got by herself. And that's when the BBC reporter found her. And through a translator, they discovered her story, and they realized that she was on her own, speaking no foreign language at all, not being able to communicate what her problem was, and lost without anyone, a 60-year-old woman on her own in a foreign land, plus a refugee, of course. And the reporter said, "I will do everything I can in my power to help you find your son and the other members of the family. We will use Facebook, we will use Twitter, we will use Snapchat," which shows how important social media is these days. And that Facebook page was viewed 350,000 times, for instance. Just the story of this woman looking for her son. And in the end, This is a happy story, happy ending. BBC found the son, and they were reunited in Vienna at a train station. And there are videos, if you want to watch, of the mother and son hugging each other in tears. There's another story about another refugee. His name is Azam, and there's actually a hashtag on Twitter at the moment, Find Azam. He was filmed in Hungary again, in a tent where he was being treated. His face was totally bruised, and his jaw was broken. That's when the BBC reporter found him. And they started to understand what happened to this kid. But somehow they couldn't find out the reason of why he got injured. They asked where his father was, and they were told, oh, he was here a minute ago. And the boy said, my father is not here, my father is back in Turkey somewhere. He's not here with me. And then some person came, an uncle, the boy said, but presenting himself as the father. So there was something that didn't add up. The reporters got a bit suspicious. The father took him to the hospital, he said. They went to the hospital, searched for the boy, missing. They just took him away. So now there's a social campaign trying to locate whereabouts this particular kid is. What happened to him? Is he safe? Was that really a family member or some sinister person who took this kid? These are two individuals, of course, in a sea of millions of people. These are only two individuals, but making a difference in two people's lives is very important if you're talking about perspective of journalism and the media.
Yeah, Barchin, do you want to follow up on that in terms of the...
I want to link this to freedom of expression, and because one of the, I think, aim of this panel is to underline, I think, the fact that freedom of expression, freedom to criticize, freedom to debate, to discuss, helps us reach, the UN goals, help us to have better economic, social, environmental policies. I want to bring this example about the immigration issue in Turkey. The Turkish government has to be very much applauded by the fact that it has opened. It had from the beginning the open door policies to Syrian refugees. And right now there is around 2 million Syrian refugees in Turkey. You can see them everywhere. They are there. But interestingly, in Turkey, this is not debated. If I can ask to the audience how many times they have watched a debate on TV about the Syrian immigrants in Turkey, I don't think anyone will recall any debate. In Turkey, we've got lots of TV channels. Every evening you have a debate on the political developments, on football, on everything, but not one single debate about the Syrian immigrants. Because, again, there is some, government pressure, and, this is an issue that is open to emotional abuse. You can be abused of saying, are you being inhuman? What are we supposed to do? Send them back? But the issue here is not about sending them back or, criticizing their existence. The issue is about what are we going to do with them? Because in Turkey, from the beginning, the approach was they are guests. The guests are not here to stay. Normally, they will stay, and at one stage, they will leave. But right now, we have come to the point where it is most definite that they are here to stay for a long time. Therefore, we have to discuss, we have to have new governmental policies as far as integrating them. Some can come out and say, outright, okay, we should, send them away. Then we could explain them that it's not an option, to send them all the way. You can discuss that as well. But we have to encourage, as opinion makers, that, job opportunities should be provided to these Syrian immigrants. But in times of election, it's a very, time-bombing issue. The government cannot come with a project that will provide employment opportunities while, the Turks are suffering from high unemployment levels. But it is our job, to push the government, to take the necessary measures in a timely manner, but also to prepare the societies that you guys, if you think they're going to go, no, they're not going to go. So that's why the issue of debating, the issue of discussing, and the issue of criticizing is so much important at the end of the day.
Thanks. Selin, did you have something you wanted to add? I think you get a lot of support there.
Yes, absolutely, and thank you very much, Barchin, for bringing that up. Because as some members of our audience, as they have been clapping, they obviously agree with what Barchin has put up there. This is a huge, huge problem. Europe is day and night, 24/7, discussing what to do with the migrants now, isn't it? And it is on international media all the time. Everyone is, hashtag refugee welcome is one of the most viral hashtags at the moment. This is happening because the refugees have started to make their way into Europe. And obviously, this is a new sociological thing that's happening there. This is news that's happening there. So everyone's talking about it. But Turkey has been living with Syrian refugees for 4 years now. We're talking about 2 million people. How do they survive? How do they get their education? What do they do? We just don't know. I have been writing this week a series of articles about Syrian refugees, about the education problems, about the health problems, about the employment problems. And I myself was amazed about the lack of research, lack of journalism that has been put out there about these people. And I was speaking to my editor, for instance. She needed to double-check some of the things with me. She was like, this is unbelievable. How can they not get any aid at all from the state? How is this possible? And I was like, yeah, that is a situation. How many of us here know that none of the Syrian refugees who have come here with foreign ID, not with passports, but who made their way out because of the war, they don't have legally a right to work. That's why we see beggars on the street. But they're not all beggars. They're trying to find work. They are trying to do the best to find work. But one, big companies don't want to employ illegal workers. Two, they get exploited. They work for 6 months, get 1 month salary, maybe not even that. And how do they survive? That's why people are dying. We have to be able to talk about these issues. I will bring one more thing up related to this issue. For instance, I'm sure many of you remember the name of Aylan Kurdi. If you don't remember his name, I'm sure you remember the picture of a little boy washed up on the street, washed up on the beach of Bodrum on the west coast of Turkey. A little boy wearing a red T-shirt. Independent, initially, if I'm not mistaken, in the UK, published that particular picture, the most dramatic one. And they said, if these powerful images of a dead Syrian child washed up on a beach don't change Europe's attitude to refugees, what will? That was a very good justification for publishing a dead boy's picture, and it worked. Europe changed its policies. For instance, in the UK, Prime Minister David Cameron was like, he said he would not allow the refugees, migrants, to break into the UK, to break into the country. But soon after, this picture was published and it was shared. And people started talking about it. People empathized with the drama of this particular kid and his family. There was a public pressure on the government. And the UK changed its policy and said within 5 years they would allow 20,000 migrants in. That is, of course, a very little number, but a change is a change, and media can make things change.
Yeah, Barchan, briefly, and then we'll go to our
Okay, very
video.
briefly. Some of the French TV channels, they decided not to publish this picture, and I thought it was a big mistake because I think it serves to turn the blind eye to the problem. But in Turkish, we have a saying that I think fits a lot with the UN goals. Komşun açken tok yatamazsın. You cannot go to sleep full stomach when your neighbor is hungry. So our job as the press is to tell people that they cannot have comfortable lives when their neighbors are in despair, and that as far as geography is concerned, there is no such thing as close neighbor, far-long neighbor. You know, Syria is a neighbor to Britain. Nepal is a neighbor to France. Vietnam is a neighbor to Germany, and I think we have to underline this issue quite a lot.
Yeah, thanks. And in fact, it's really important to understand that the goals themselves are about governments committing to some of these issues. In this Goal 16, what we call the governance and peace building goal, governments are required to ensure public access to information and to the protection of fundamental freedoms, including media freedom and other freedoms. That is part of the goals themselves. The goals require governments and civil society and media to work together towards improving responsive, accountable institutions and towards people's engagement in decision making. So it's important to understand that the goals are both an end in themselves, but also a tool for media and towards more responsive governance. I think we'll take a moment to break and play the video on Syrian boat people, as our tech people will indicate. Could we play the Syrian boat people video, please? And then we'll have some final remarks to the panel.
Mama? Mama.
My mother.
Hey. Hey, habibi. Mama? Mama? Okay. Yunani, okay?
اسقام شلو عمودي نادم باريس والمانيا هولي روبطماني نادم بروسا وايطاليا كاتشك جامادي ونصا كاتشك كردا حرف مترا دوري مكف هي ولم كردن هرم برسامة بكنامنا عرب وتركن وچي بيستي ونماش بجاري مدرخن
Thank you, welcome. كوباني قدران كوباني
تعالوا لهون يا محمد.
From Syria to Egypt, in the sea, Italy, Germany, Denmark, Sweden. Miss my father and miss my family and miss my home and miss my Syria, my old Syria.
وچي بيستي ونماش بجاري مدرخن كازل لما وكاهلي ما بقرن هي نقل قل بر هي أمي تفترو جافا فاكن شد بملا ببيس كوباني برنادم حسك يا خامنة أجيب أزنادم رابن بحزارة لها مو بجارة بان كل تارا تشكي نسينورة هيدا اللي خن سليماني هيدا قربي خان خبات وشروكي في العرض خان. Come on, yes.
ألمانيا ألمانيا تهريب ع ألمانيا ما زبطت من تركيا تزبط من إسبانيا.
ولك سوريا سوريا يا قلب عمري اشتقت لأهلك وناسك ولك وينك يا قلبي رجعيلي ولك آخ يا غربة آخ يا غربة حرقتي قلبي ولك حرقتي قلبي يما وينك وينك يما تعالي يمي وينك يما تعالي يمي ولك الغربة صعبة يا ناس يا ناس الغربة صعبة ما حد يترك البلد ولك سوريا يا أغلى من الذهب آخ يا سوريا.
So let's take a moment to wrap up the panel. My last question will really focus in on this global goals question. So how can media play a role in not only uncovering the issues and the goals and what governments and societies need to do to reach the goals, but also a role in helping and communicate what the goals are to society and to help with their monitoring and their implementation. So I'd just like the panels to reflect a little bit. Do you see a role for media in terms of communicating over the next 15 years what these goals are, how governments are doing on them, whether we are reaching them, holding the global society to account, and in particular the United Nations, to whether we are making progress on these goals? What would that role be, and what do you see in the future the connections are? Barchan?
Well, perhaps at this stage I might do a bit of self-criticism, Obviously, the media has a lot of role to play as far as reaching these goals are concerned. But to what degree we are aware of these goals, To what degree we prioritize them, Especially when you live in a country like mine, Turkey, when there is continuous economic and political turmoil, talking about, certain issues, water shortage in Africa, or educational problems somewhere else. Sometimes it sounds like a luxury, because, as I said, we are having our own problems. We have a lot of constraints ourselves, economic constraints, political constraints. Therefore, we just try to keep up to the agenda. And as I said, in a country like Turkey, where every day we are dealing with extraordinary sort of developments, sometimes we do neglect to talk about these goals. So therefore, perhaps we need to take a break from time to time and to reflect on it. I was, before the panel, I listened to the previous panel, and I was thanking the UNDP officials for having invited me to speak at this panel. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come to this conference. Otherwise, I was again busy dealing with the non-ending political discussions in Turkey. But even coming here has been an eye-opener to me, Turkey. So a grain of criticism for us is that, sometimes we have to, think about this, reflect, and sort of give more space in our television channels, despite the fact that it might not, break the records in the ratings, despite the fact that it might perhaps not get the ticks, the clicks in the internet. We have to say, no, this is a social responsibility. We have to do it.
Thanks. Pinar.
Okay, on top of this, I'm a little bit confused because I am supporting strongly slow journalism because data journalism is actually very slow journalism. So you only produce sometimes you're spending 8 months to produce one project. So about the goals for the future of journalism and for media, for Turkey, I can really share lots of things, but for generally, what I see, what I'm doing from my point of view, data-driven future is waiting us. And the government's database could be more open for the future of media, for us, for everybody. So what NGOs, civil society or journalists, academicians, they should really, really work hard to change this environment more than before, because we have in digital age now, and every second data is flowing, and this is very important. And I would like to little bit focus in like 2 minutes what we do, and this is maybe can be the little bit feature of media in Turkey or in a global issue. We are under the very really heavy agenda all the time. But what is my angle all the time? Despite all this heavy pressure, so I still working, I want to really still work harder to make things happen. So since 2012, and maybe 13 as well, I'm doing data journalism workshops. And it's really every month, we do maybe 2-3 different data journalism projects. And what is happening after the projects? We are receiving lots of feedbacks from the attenders. They say, we now understand why media need to use the data more than before, why we are more engaged with the data, because databases, open data, and social data, we are all engaged. So I see in the future of Turkey, from my point, if we work hard and the good things still can happen in the future of media for Turkey, and also openness. So this is what I am believing a little bit.
Thanks. Selin, thoughts on the future of the media in terms of helping to monitor the implementation of the goals, both in Turkey and across the world?
Within Turkey, I agree with my colleagues here, particularly what Barcin has said as a self-criticism of the media. Yes, especially Turkish media just can't find the time, afford the time, or is not just bothered to talk about social responsibility issues, because there is a lot of turmoil going on around its borders, and there's an election coming up, political crisis, everything, something else is happening. Sometimes people joke, in a day we live what a Norwegian would live in a 10-year, we say. So, but I'll take it to a global side now. Working at the BBC for 10 years, I think BBC, being a public broadcast journalism organization, is doing the most it can to touch these matters. Whenever UN comes up with a particular number, Syrian refugees have reached 1 million. That was a threshold, for instance, and we did a day of lives, we did a day of coverage, talking to refugees, talking to experts, etc. Of course it can do more. There's always room for improvement. But international organizations, news organizations are doing much better than if we compare it to what the Turkish media is doing.
Well, thanks so much. I think it's important just here to note that the global goals are not just global goods that exist out for others, but they are intended to be owned by all of the societies of all of the states of the world. And they're signed off by every government, the Turkish government and all of the governments that are members of the United Nations.
So the issues and the targets reflected in the global goals are intended for Turkey and for all countries of the world. And that is what's so new about these goals, that these goals don't just apply to the poorest countries on the planet. These are now truly global goals. All countries, no matter what their level of development, no matter what their GDP, have signed up to make these goals a reality over the next 15 years. So I want to thank my panelists so much for having a really engaging and interesting discussion. I hope you all enjoyed it and learned as much as I did. Thank you so much.
Evet, moderatörümüze ve panelistlerimize çok teşekkür ederiz. Shelley Inglis, thank you for being such a wonderful moderator. This is a little remembrance of the day. Barçın İnanç. See, I always mix you up with Burçın İmir.
Exactly.
That's the thing.
That's
That's the thing. It's not my
Yes,
problem,
it's
you know.
another colleague of mine, you know.
Really sorry. You were great. Pınar Dağ, harikaydınız. Çok çok teşekkür ederiz. Selin Girit, harikaydınız. Çok teşekkür ederiz. Ve alkışlarla değerli moderatörümüzü ve panelistlerimizi yerlerine uğurluyoruz. Değerli katılımcılarımız, önce size 5 tane hatırlatmam var. 1. Hashtag 2030 şimdi now etiketiyle Instagram gönderimi yapanlar resimlerini basılı alabilirler. 2. Bir daha söylemeyeceğim bunu. 2. Fuaye alanındaki standları ve Türk Telekom standını gezmeyi atlamayın. 3. Çantada neler var diye mutlaka bakmışsınızdır ama çok faydalı bir oyundan bahsedeceğim size. Küresel hedeflerin anlamları ve isimleri İngilizce ve Türkçe olarak karşılaştırılabiliyor. Çocuklarınızla oynayabilirsiniz, kendiniz oynayabilirsiniz. Hoş bir anı olarak kalacak bugünden size. 4. Fuayede dart oyunu var. Dart oynayanlar sürpriz hediyeler kazanabilirler. Eğer vakit bulursanız atlamayın. 5. Şimdi yemeğe gidiyoruz. Yemeğimiz fuayede. Hızlı yenebilecek türden yemekler hazırladık sizin için. Saat tam 2'de salonda olmayı ne olur ihmal etmeyin. Daha önce zamanında geldiğiniz için çok teşekkür ederim. 2'de burada görüşmek dileğiyle, afiyet olsun.